Okay, I realized I'm gonna split this video into two different parts because I want to address all of this, but I think the first video was already long enough. So I'm just gonna split this into two parts. If you watch this part all the way to the end, I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I appreciate you listening to me just rambling on about art and about my art specifically. And yeah, I'm gonna break this up into two parts because I think that it will flow better because I realized that there's a lot I want to say. There's more I wanted to say about my paintings than I realized, and then I want to get into the second part. So thank you for watching. This is imagining Bloodborne as if it were an animated series, part 3, kind of just the behind the scenes, going through the process and things like that. And this is really a part 2B, honestly, more than it is a part 3. Because I wanted to go more into some of the exploration, style explorations and things like that I did, and then also a failed 2.0 of this project that I've got some drawing, some paintings from here that I did earlier, and I just want to talk about that as well. Okay, so to start off with, as I kind of mentioned, in the first video that the current iteration of this Bloodborne project that I'm working on it's like the third version because the first one I did a while ago. I did it, I don't know, maybe started like 5 or 6 years ago or something. And I was going for a very painterly look, and my skill wasn't there. You know, I had a goal in my head, but my skill level just wasn't up to par with my ambitions. And then I continued working on it for a while. Arcane came out. I felt like, oh, what's the point of working on this thing? Arcane already kind of executed the style I wanted to do, but better. What's the point? I moved on. Then I saw this movie called Klaus, which is like a Christmas movie with a very, you'd say simple style, but it's still, it's got, a decent amount of rendering. The characters are rendered, the backgrounds are rendered quite nicely, but it has a nice amount of visual texture, which I really appreciated. Almost like they use a lot of maybe graphite pencils or things like that, those sort of textures to render. And then you've got a lot of visual noise overlaid over everything. So that was this is kind of my second attempt. And I do have a couple, some surviving files from that attempt. I started on that pretty close after Klaus came out. I kind of had renewed interest in this project. I mean, it's always been in the back of my head, like I want to complete this thing. But I thought like, oh, like that's a bit simpler. I think I could actually do that. And again, I don't have all the files, deleted most of everything because I just had to at the time. But I've got Lady Maria's clock tower here, and then also a painting of Maria. And yeah, I'll just kind of quickly go through it. Basically, I start off kind of similar to the other paintings I've done where I have a basic sketch and something like that. And I actually just realized I forgot to explain last time. In the part 1, I showed my sketches, and they were digital sketches. I have not been consistent with how I've started out these paintings. So some of them were done digitally to start out, and then I painted everything. Some started out digitally and I painted digitally. Some things started off me drawing traditionally, and then I painted digitally. I just took a picture with my phone. So that's why this it's just looks like a physical drawing, because it was just, sometimes I'd be in my sketchbook and I'd like kind of think of a composition I wanted to do. So I would just like sketch it down and then refine it. And then I just took a picture with my phone and then uploaded that to my iPad, and I would paint from there. And I think that some of I use like on my Android, I'll take a picture, and it'll take a picture of what I'm taking a picture of, and then will ask me if it wants to like almost translate it to being perfectly flat, so you can like grab the corners and make it flat. I don't know what that feature is called, but it basically tries to flatten the image for you. And I think there's some weird things going on because sometimes it sort of adds curves and makes things a bit slanted in areas. Or I haven't seen this image in a bit in my sketchbook. Maybe I just drew that slanted, but it does add a bit of weird quirks like that sometimes. But so I went from the sketch here, and then these are kind of the two not quite finished paintings of her. These actually are finished, but I started to add a feather, and I just forgot to complete it. I mean, since the project never really went anywhere. But the main thing you'll see is I wanted to go for a sort of soft gradient, like on, I think his name is Jasper, I want to say. On Jasper, they've got these nice soft edges from light to dark, right? It's very fuzzy, very soft, very warm. You can see on his nose and things like that. And then you can see he's still, the lighting, the ambient lighting around him is still affecting the colors of his uniform and how he appears in this image. It's not like even though it was 2D hand drawn, it's not like, you know, most cartoons you grew up with where maybe their color scheme doesn't even fit the environment because they're just a flat 2D image. So that's what I was going with for her. I wanted to honestly go for even more texture. So you'll see on her nose, on the strands of her hair and things like that, they kind of taper off with a graphite grit. You know, it's not a solid line all the way through. And I really enjoyed the texture of that. I tried to even leave that texture in as I, you know, worked on the chair and details and things like that. You'll see that even on her collar, I kind of left the pencil sketch in to sort of define the line and things like that. And I tried to make everything very soft as I could. Not only because it fit the mood I wanted to go for the character, for the shot, because you'll see it doesn't look as soft here. But again, I'm trying to go for that smooth gradient feel, like in the show. And then I did try, like, I like J.C. Leyendecker. I love a lot of his art. And you can kind of see his paint strokes, very pronounced, they're emphasized in his work. And so I tried to do that here, but rather than with a paintbrush, I tried to do it with, you know, the graphite pencil. So I kind of took the same painting. I tried to go back in, and you can see the marks and stuff like that. Not everywhere. I didn't want to fill it in everywhere, but just add even a bit more texture. And I wanted to make sure she looks tired, because that is very important, I figured, to her character, since she is quite literally a corpse, basically. She needs to look pretty dead, pretty lifeless, but also just tired. So I didn't want her to have, like, you know, perfect features. I think that should be honestly darker. But, you know, give her some sort of eye bag and things like that, make her look a little exhausted. And then with her clock tower, same thing. You'll notice I tried to go for that, you know, graphite textured look, but then I also used a bigger brush with a lot of visual noise. Same thing on the clock tower and things like that. And overall, I like this composition. I like the value of it and things like that. I liked making her chair really small and emphasizing just how grand and how large the room is. I mean, you can't even see the bells. There's another sketch where you can see all the bells hanging in the top of the clock tower. And this obviously isn't finished, but, you know, this might be a hint towards a composition I might reuse for the current version. And then lastly, a couple things I wanted to touch on is that a few more pieces of, or maybe not at this point, I don't know if they inspired the Bloodborne project necessarily, but I still just really enjoy seeing other artists kind of enjoy and translate similar art styles that I like. This isn't the best example, but this is from Sea of Thieves. I couldn't find any good screenshots of my own, but they'll do a sort of similarly painted rendering despite it being a 3D game. And then there's this game called Death's Door, I believe, and it's a really good game. And you'll notice the same thing, edge highlights, you know, painterly texture on 3D objects, which is just very nice, really lovely. Anyway, moving on to the last section I wanted to go over is I wanted to go over some of these style explorations and things like that I did kind of along the way. Maybe, I'm not sure what time period I would have started a lot of these, maybe before this project, maybe after. And I'll start with this kind of crucifix cross thing over here, because I believe the first shot I wanted to do at one point was the werewolf who's like up on this crucifix there's like a giant bonfire behind him. And I was trying to test out different styles, and I wanted to make sure I knew how the lighting was going to look and things like that. So I went ahead and built this 3D model in Blender just so I could get a good feel for, you know, the cast shadow of the spikes and things like that. Obviously, I luckily have the luxury of taking in-game screenshots, so I have great reference for a lot of the, you know, for a lot of the paintings I want to make, in terms of getting inspiration for how the architecture looks, how the, you know, objects in Bloodborne look and things like that. I can go into the game, which is really nice. But in this case, I went ahead and built this 3D model, and see, the way I rendered it is I basically would create a brush stroke, and then I would try and emphasize the edge of that brush stroke. And then even for the metal, I tried to add little cracks and things like that. I would try and make these, little brush strokes and then emphasize the edge of those. Now it's not even just objects that I'm emphasizing, but literal brush strokes. And that's because I'm not sure where it started, but at some point down the line, I thought instead of going for like a gouache approach or something like that, or, you know, more of like a, yeah, like Studio Ghibli-esque approach, I decided to go for like, what if it looked like thick, you know, kind of back to what I was talking about with the clay thing. What if it was like thick globs of, you know, acrylic paint or oil paint, where they have like, where, you know, you're making a picture, you're making the illusion of light and dark, of light and shadow, but then you have your actual brush strokes, your actual paint strokes have erased areas where the physical light from the environment is creating these highlights in these low areas. And I really like that idea, and I played around with that idea a lot. You'll see in this brick I rendered, I try to keep some of the same principles that I've been going along with the whole time, but I would basically make, you know, maybe I've got like a deeper green here, and then I've got like this more saturated green, and I'd make a brush stroke, and then I would individually go in and paint along the edges. And then oftentimes what I'd do is I would make the brush stroke, paint, you know, the paint doesn't just raise along the edge, sometimes it's within the stroke. So I'd raise the edge a bit here, and then I would also paint, I would imagine that the light source, you know, is above here, and then it would make a cast shadow onto the surface beneath it, on top of, you know, trying to render the actual object that I'm trying to render. This was obviously a very monotonous process. You know, maybe someone else likes it. Like I like the idea, but like rendering this rock for instance, which I have two examples of. Yeah. So this is a screenshot from Dishonored. Surprise, surprise. And then I rendered it kind of in a more, you know, with some more transparent wash brushes and things like that. And then I tried rendering it this way, where it looks like it's, you know, it looks like there's acrylic paint, or again, thick oil slapped over everything. And I loved it, but okay, you know, I realized this is going to take me forever to paint anything, because I have to paint something and create the illusion of light and dark, and then actually also create the illusion of brush strokes. So I experimented for a long time trying to, in Photoshop and in Procreate, I tried to experiment with making a brush stroke and having it generate almost like a highlight and a low light underneath it, to almost try and simulate, right, that, you know, that real world light coming down. But I could just never get anything that produced a good result. So I think I eventually, you know, abandoned that. But there are some pretty cool things that I still like the look of this a lot, where I've got these cool textures and things like that, but then also these pieces of paint that look like they're physically there. If I ever get a studio, maybe I could actually just physically paint all of these, and then I wouldn't have to simulate it. I could, you know, remove a step for myself. But I thought it was pretty cool. I love the game Transistor by Supergiant Games, and so I think I was trying to go for more of a Supergiant Games, like Transistor-esque rendering style with this. And then here are some more studies I did just of Dishonored. I go back to the screenshots I have, yeah, I would just take screenshots like this in the game all the time, and then I would upload them to my computer and then just try and do studies. And I really liked all the texture and things like that. And yes, the highlighted edges that will be mentioned in all of these videos, you know, and then just try and like exaggerate that and translate that to the wood behind it and things like that. Tried adding lots of texture to brick in a variety of manner. There's an artist who I really enjoy their work. I think on ArtStation, you could look up Atnajoy. It's like ATNA and then Joy. I'm pretty sure they worked on Arcane actually, and they clearly love Studio Ghibli movies, as do I. And so I'm clearly that no doubt in my mind that it has influenced their art style and what they want to go for, which I kind of failed to mention in the first video, but that's another influence for myself, and also I think for you know, a lot of projects like Arcane is definitely those people love Studio Ghibli. I mean, who doesn't? But still, you can just see it in the brush strokes and in the color palette. In this painting, for instance, but they've got a lot of beautiful work, fantastic work, and you know, I would just try and emulate some of that as well. I think I got better as I went along, but I think in one specific example, yeah, I tried using only opaque brushes, or only opaque brush strokes, and tried to have a light side and maybe a darker side. And I still really like how this looks. Maybe I'll use it for something else, but it was a little tough to get like smoother transitions, right? When you're looking at a rock or something like that, it's easier on a box, but to get those smooth transitions, I couldn't quite figure out how to do it. I think this was like another quick Lady Maria test. I'm not sure what happened here. Maybe I was in a rush. Because it's a very sketchy sketch style, but regardless, I think I was trying to get something down so that I could try and lay in these paints, because I was trying to imagine, okay, what would, you know, the portraits when I'm rendering the characters of the game, what would they look like in this style? So you can see the raised edge. Honestly, this looks better than how I remember it. I kind of remember chalking it up to being a failure and not really capturing that effect, but I think I've got some areas of light and dark, and it looks like there's paint, like just thick pieces of paint on top of it. So maybe I will do something with that in the future. I think this was from a still from like Berserk that I painted, that I used as reference, because I liked that sort of, I felt like the rendering that I did here was similar here. And sometimes you need to look at someone else's art even to get through it. There's a lot more, maybe I shouldn't go over every single piece individually, but you can see a lot of the things that I'm going for in these bricks, in whatever the heck this is. It looks like a I tried I took one of the ravens from Bloodborne, and I thought, how would they look if I, you know, did light to dark with these highlighted brush strokes. And once again, I think it's actually, these came out better than how I remember them. I mean, I did this, I don't know, 3 years ago, so I haven't looked at it in a while. And then a few other different explorations, not doing that, but just trying to get, you know, that dishonored painterly look. And then this tower was another object that I built in Blender, and then I just painted it on top to see how it would look. I did a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of images that I'm not showing. I've tons of these just like random swatches and random boxes and things like that, and trying to explore and figure out a style that I want for this project. I think this tower is actually from Dark Souls 3. In Dark Souls 3, when I was playing through it, I think it's in like the sort of like a witchy woods area. All right, that's about it in terms of this process video. As always, I really appreciate it if you are taking time out of your day to listen to this whole thing. That's really cool. It means a lot, and I hope that I'm offering some sort of insight, or, you know, even just providing entertainment. Or maybe you're not an artistic person at all, but you're kind of curious about the process of artists. I hope this kind of, you know, provides you with something along those lines, and you find it interesting. Thank you so much, and hopefully I'll be able to make a few more of these.